The man's hand trembled as he pointed the black pistol straight at my daughter's forehead. His voice cracked with false authority. "Step back. You're trespassing. I'm the head of HOA security, and this is a private street." But my daughter, she didn't flinch. Not once. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She didn't even blink. She just stood there, arms slowly raised at shoulder height, calm as the wind brushing her tactical jacket, her badge hidden beneath it, and a glint in her eyes that didn't match the fear he expected to see. It was quiet defiance. Calculated. Cold. Like a soldier sizing up an amateur who had no idea what kind of war he'd just started. I was frozen on the porch, keys still in my hand, 1 foot halfway down the steps. My wife had just pulled into the driveway behind the scene, headlights catching the metallic flash of the weapon. The neighbors peeked through blinds, phones in hand, but no one dared to step outside. The security officer, a middle-aged wannabe with a military haircut and a self-bought badge, kept yelling nonsense about HOA enforcement and citizens' arrest. But that's when she finally spoke. Quiet. Controlled. "You really don't want to do this." He barked back, louder now. "I said on the ground. I know people like you. Always think the rules don't apply." My daughter tilted her head slightly. "Funny. I was thinking the same about you." Then the distant hum of approaching engines. Not police sirens. Something heavier. Deeper. Black SUVs, 2 of them, turning the corner with synchronized precision. No lights. No warning. Just presence. Like wolves moving in on a wounded deer. And that's when he started sweating. The man's hands began to shake. He took a step back as the doors of the lead vehicle opened, boots hitting pavement in rhythm, dark-suited figures stepping out with grim expressions and earpieces. One flashed credentials. One had his hand on a sidearm. The other looked straight at my daughter and nodded. The HOA man stammered something about his rights, waving the pistol in confusion before one agent calmly disarmed him, twisted his wrist with a single move, and brought him to his knees. My daughter didn't move until he was cuffed. Then she finally turned to me. "You okay, Dad?" That's when it hit me. This wasn't just my little girl. This wasn't just a federal agent. This was the woman who trains FBI tactical units to handle terror threats on you as soil. And that's the exact moment the HOA security guy realized the woman he just threatened commands federal tactical raids for the United States government. Before everything spiraled into chaos, before a fake security badge turned into a loaded gun aimed at my daughter's head, we were just a quiet family living in a neighborhood we thought was safe, maybe even too quiet. The kind of place where people mow their lawns like clockwork on Saturdays, bake way too many cookies for holiday parties, and wave to each other from across white picket fences, as if that somehow meant everything was okay. We moved into the Ridgewood Oaks community 10 years ago. Back then, it was just my wife, Emily, and me. Our daughter, Marissa, had just graduated college and was already climbing through the ranks in federal service. We didn't talk much about what she did. She was always careful, always guarded, always quick to change the subject when it drifted too close to classified details. All I knew was that it had something to do with national security, and that whatever it wasn't a desk job. But to us, she was still our girl. The same girl who helped neighbors carry groceries, who called her mom every week like clockwork, and who never missed Thanksgiving, no matter what mission she had just returned from. She was the kind of person who could walk into a room and immediately calm the tension, but you also got the feeling she could disarm a bomb blindfolded if she had to. A mix of warmth and steel, that was Marissa. By the time she was in her early 30s, she'd already earned a reputation in federal circles, though not many people in Ridgewood Oaks had any clue. We never bragged. We never had to. Most folks just knew her as the quiet, kind daughter who came home from D.C. every few months and grilled the best steaks on the block. I worked from home, financial consulting, and Emily was a school counselor. Our life was, in many ways, idyllic, peaceful, predictable. We loved our neighbors, even the quirky ones. Our block was filled with retired teachers, tech workers, and overly enthusiastic dog parents. There were occasional disagreements, barking dogs, misplaced trash bins, but nothing that couldn't be solved with a friendly knock on the door and a slice of lemon cake. And then there was the HOA. The Ridgewood Oaks Homeowners Association wasn't just a committee, it was an institution. Rules for everything. Grass height? Regulated. Holiday lights? 2 weeks before and 1 week after, no exceptions. Your front door color? Must be within the earth tone spectrum, unless otherwise approved. We chuckled about it at first, thought it was cute, even a little annoying, sure, but manageable. That was until the leadership changed. A new president was voted in. Her name was Patricia Loomis, but everyone on the street called her Asterisk Karen behind closed doors. A textbook case, platinum blonde bob, eternally furrowed brow, clipboard glued to her hand like it was a natural limb. She wasn't elected so much as she infiltrated the HOA, pushing out the older, more reasonable board members and replacing them with people who shared her obsession with restoring order. And she brought someone new along with her, a man named Hank Struther. No one knew much about Hank. He didn't live on our street. He wasn't even a homeowner, which ironically should have disqualified him from being on the HOA enforcement team. But Patricia had found a loophole. She labeled him a volunteer community officer, appointed him as the unofficial head of Ridgewood Oak Security, and gave him a vest, a badge he ordered off Amazon, and, God help us, a radio. From the beginning, Hank was trouble. He parked outside people's homes at night, watching their comings and goings like it was a crime scene. He wore dark sunglasses, even on overcast days, and always carried a clipboard, as if writing things down made them real violations. He'd knock on doors if your recycling bin wasn't perfectly aligned. He once left a warning notice because someone had a garden gnome visible from the street. And then there were the patrols. Patricia authorized nightly HOA patrols, not by real security professionals, not even off-duty cops, but by volunteers. People like Hank who took the idea of community protection and twisted it into something sinister. They walked around with flashlights and walkie-talkies, recording people on their phones, muttering about suspicious activity if someone stayed in their car too long. I kept my distance. Most of us did. It wasn't worth the drama. But when Marissa came home that summer, after a particularly long stretch away, things shifted. I remember the day she arrived. She pulled into the driveway in her dark blue SUV, stepped out in jeans and a plain t-shirt, and immediately dropped her duffel bag to hug me. She looked tired, not in a physical way, but in that deeper, soul-worn way that comes from seeing too much. Emily made her favorite lasagna, and we sat out back, catching up under string lights, trying to pretend like the world outside didn't exist. But peace doesn't last long in places ruled by fear and control. Marissa had been home for less than a week when the first HOA notice arrived, a warning about her parking too close to the mailbox. She rolled her eyes and shrugged it off. Then came the second, a formal violation stating her license plate wasn't registered with the community board. That one annoyed her. She called to clarify, only to be placed on hold for 40 minutes before being disconnected. Then the surveillance started. It was subtle at first. Hank parked across the street, pretending to be on a phone call, jotting things down in his notebook. Then we noticed a drone hovering nearby for a few nights in a row. Someone left a typed note in our mailbox. Your guest seems uncooperative. Ridgewood doesn't tolerate rule breakers. That's when Marissa's demeanor changed. She didn't speak about it much, but I could see her military switch flip. She started taking different routes when jogging, checked the perimeter lights twice before bed, sat by the window a little longer after dinner, quietly observing. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, she said, "They're testing me, seeing how far they can push." Emily tried to downplay it. Maybe it's just Hank being Hank. But Marissa shook her head. No, this is bigger than one man with a toy badge. This is about control, fear. Weak men like him don't stop unless they're stopped. I'd never heard her voice so steady and so cold. And she was right. Within days, the situation escalated. We received a formal HOA summons claiming Marissa was interfering with community operations and displaying aggressive conduct. Aggressive? My daughter hadn't said a single word to them outside of asking for their badge numbers. Then Hank approached her directly. It was a sunny afternoon. Marissa was sitting on the porch, sipping tea and reading. Hank pulled up in his rusted-out truck, wearing a black tactical vest and aviators. He stepped out, walked up to the gate, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You're not above the law, Mississippi. I've got eyes on you." Marissa looked up, calm, measured. "So does the federal government," she replied. He scoffed and walked away. But it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. We didn't know it then, but Hank was preparing to make a move, one that would turn this ridiculous HOA power trip into a life-or-death moment on our front lawn. A moment that would expose just how dangerous unchecked authority can be and how woefully unprepared some men are for the truth about the women they try to intimidate, especially when that woman leads federal tactical raids. It was a Tuesday afternoon, warm sun, cloudless sky, the kind of day you'd expect peace to wrap itself around everything like a warm blanket. I was sitting on the porch with a cold glass of sweet tea, scrolling aimlessly through my phone when I saw Marissa walking up the street, earbuds in, wearing her gray athletic gear, relaxed, grounded. She had just finished her morning run, a habit she never broke, not even when she was home on leave. She looked like any other young woman in the neighborhood, except she wasn't. Not even close. Her pace slowed as she reached the mailbox. She pulled it open, sifted through envelopes, then paused. She stood still, brow furrowing. "Hey, Dad," she called, holding up a bright orange slip. "Why did I just get a $200 citation for parking on unregistered asphalt?" I laughed, thinking she was joking. "That's not even a thing." She walked over and handed it to me. I read it twice. The HOA had issued an official violation claiming she had parked illegally on the concrete strip between our driveway and the sidewalk, the same spot we'd used for overflow parking for nearly a decade without issue. Marissa shook her head. "This is targeted. They don't like that I'm not bending to their nonsense." I wanted to tell her to let it go, that it wasn't worth the trouble, but I saw that familiar tightness in her jaw, the one she wore when she was debriefing after a difficult mission or watching politicians spew garbage on TV. She wasn't angry. She was calculating. "I'm going to talk to them," she said, voice cool as ever, calmly. I didn't stop her. She wasn't the kind of woman who stormed into conflict. She moved through it with precision. And so she marched straight to the HOA office at the clubhouse just 3 blocks away, slip in hand. I didn't go with her. I wish I had. According to what she told me later, the front office was empty when she arrived, except for him, Hank Struther, head of the Neighborhood Security Initiative, as he liked to call it. He was sitting behind the desk like he owned the place, sipping burnt coffee from a mug that read, "This is my safe space." She walked in, polite as ever, and placed the slip on the counter. "I need clarification on this citation. I've lived here 10 years, and that spot has always been acceptable." He barely looked up. "We're cracking down on noncompliant behavior. You've been warned." Marissa paused. "I haven't. Not once. This is the first I'm hearing of this regulation." He smiled, not a kind one. The kind of smirk that men like him wear when they feel a flicker of power. "Well, now you've heard it. Better start following the rules, sweetheart." Sweetheart. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. She just replied, "I'm not here for small talk. Just show me where this rule is documented." He stood up then, slowly, chest puffed, stepping out from behind the desk like he wanted to tower over her. "Who do you think you are?" he growled. "You think you can just walk in here and question my authority?" That's when she tilted her head and said the words that would ignite something deep and ugly in him. "I'm just asking for transparency. Isn't that what good leadership looks like?" He slammed a binder down on the desk. "Get out." She picked up the citation, nodded once, and walked away. That was it. No screaming. No threats. No retaliation. But for Hank, that calmness, that unshakable calm, was the ultimate insult. Because the truth is, men like him don't fear chaos. They fear composure. They fear being seen for what they are. Unqualified men playing dress-up in positions they were never meant to hold. By that evening, I noticed Hank's truck parked outside our house again. This time, he wasn't hiding. He sat in the driver's seat, engine off, just watching. The next day, we found another note in the mailbox. This one wasn't an official citation. It was handwritten, typed in all caps, printed on cheap paper. We don't need outsiders challenging the order. Back down or face the consequences. I looked at Marissa, expecting her to be shaken. But instead, she folded the paper in half and said calmly, "He's spiraling. He's going to push this further." I asked her if she wanted to report it. She just shook her head. "Let him come," she said. "He has no idea who he's dealing with." And she was right, because from that moment forward, the balance shifted. It wasn't just a citation. It wasn't just an insult. It was a targeted act of harassment. And it would only get worse from here. That day, the day of that first confrontation, wasn't just the day Hank showed his true colors. It was the day he unknowingly declared war on a woman trained to win wars for a living. It started gradually, like a sickness that creeps into a home under the guise of routine. Small acts of overreach, dressed in the language of order and community safety. The day after Marissa confronted Hank in the clubhouse, 3 new volunteer security officers began patrolling Ridgewood Oaks. They were neighbors, yes, but armed now with reflective vests, cheap walkie-talkies, and laminated badges printed at home. They walked the sidewalks at night, not for peace of mind, but to stare into windows. They held clipboards, not to take notes, but to document suspicions. And they didn't patrol the whole neighborhood, just our street. Just our house. One of them, a skinny man named Don who sold insurance, even brought his teenage son along on patrol like it was some sick form of HOA family bonding. At first, I thought it would die down. I told myself they'd grow tired once they realized we weren't easy targets. But Karen, Patricia Loomis, had other ideas. She went door to door, whispering lies about us to the neighbors. She told them my daughter was a federal snitch, someone who was spying on suburban communities and reporting innocent families to the government. It was ludicrous, a delusional story spun by a woman drunk on control, but people started listening. Fear is powerful when it's dressed in the uniform of neighborhood protection. One by one, we were cut off. Neighbors who used to wave now looked the other way. Emily stopped getting invited to book club. And Marissa, she became the subject of their whispered stories, the outsider who didn't follow the rules. It escalated fast. One night, Marissa was sitting by the window reading when a red light danced across the glass. She stood up calmly, walked to the side, and peered out. A man stood behind a hedge across the street, holding a small drone controller in one hand and a phone in the other, recording her. She opened the window and said, loud enough for him to hear, "Recording people through their window is a felony. You want to be arrested or just embarrassed on the local news?" The man ran. The next day, she filed a formal complaint with the sheriff's department. The deputy shrugged it off. "It's HOA business," he said, as if that explained away the violation of privacy, as if homeowners associations had somehow replaced the Constitution. That night, someone spray-painted our sidewalk with the words, "We see you." It wasn't paint either. It was some chemical bleach that burned the concrete white. Marissa stayed calm. Always. She didn't cry, didn't snap. She adjusted the perimeter cameras, filed every report, cataloged every threat. The calm before the storm. But it wasn't until they messed with her car that I truly saw the switch flip inside her. She came out one morning to find every tire slashed and a note under her wiper blade that read, "Your kind doesn't belong here." That day, she didn't even speak. She made a call. Not to the police, not to the HOA, but to someone in Washington. She walked into the house afterward, set her phone down, and told me, "We've got surveillance authorization now. I'm setting up motion detection with facial recognition. They want names." I didn't ask who they was. I didn't need to, because now I knew. This wasn't about an HOA anymore. This was about targeting a federal agent on American soil. Karen must have gotten wind of it somehow, because the very next morning, she called an emergency HOA board meeting. We weren't invited, obviously, but the whole neighborhood buzzed with it. The story was that Marissa was planning something dangerous, that she was invading privacy with military technology, and that the HOA would now enact heightened protective oversight. Translation: they were going to stalk her harder. That's when it happened. That's when a mask came off. That Friday around 4:30 p.m., I was out front watering the roses. The sun was low, golden light stretching across the driveway. Emily had gone to pick up groceries, and Marissa had just gotten home from her gym session. Nothing intense, just a quick routine to stay sharp. She parked in the driveway, stepped out with her gym bag slung across her shoulder, wearing black leggings, a gray pullover, and her tactical boots. And that's when he appeared, Hank Struther. He pulled up fast in his beat-up black truck, barely braking before throwing the door open and storming out. He wore a tactical vest, the kind you buy online when you want to pretend you're in law enforcement, and had something strapped to his hip. He walked up the driveway shouting, "I told you to leave. You're a threat to this neighborhood. You've been surveilling civilians." I started walking over. Hank, back off, but he cut me off with a shout. You're harboring a threat. She's got no right being here." And then it happened. He drew it, a matte black handgun, pointed directly at Marissa's chest. On the ground now. I'm executing a citizen's arrest under HOA protection law. My heart stopped. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was watching a movie, but the kind that ends in tragedy. But Marissa? She didn't move. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She let her gym bag slide to the ground slowly, raised her hands shoulder level. Calm, eyes locked on his. "You don't want to do this," she said. Her voice was steady, measured. "This is your final warning. Put the weapon down. You don't tell me what to do." Hank screamed. "You're not special. You think you're some kind of agent? You think you can scare me?" I took another step, slowly, but Marissa's eyes flicked to me, a silent command. "Stay back. Don't move." She was controlling the space, controlling him. Her tone shifted, lower now. "I am not a threat. But if you point that weapon at me again, I will disarm you." He shook, sweat running down his temple, gun twitching in his grip, and then, from behind, came the rumble. Two black SUVs turned the corner, fast but silent, no sirens, just presence. They rolled up side by side, blocking the street. 4 men stepped out, black suits, tactical gear underneath, earpieces glowing. One flashed a badge I'd only seen once before, in a moment Marissa had asked me never to talk about. "FBI, drop your weapon." Hank turned just slightly. That was all it took. One of the agents rushed him, twisted his wrist, and dropped him to the ground like a sack of flour. Weapon kicked aside. Zip ties locked. Hank screamed, cursed, spit on the pavement. The agent leaned in. "You just pulled a loaded gun on a federal tactical officer," he said. "You have no idea how lucky you are to still be breathing." The neighbors came out now, phones in hand, mouths agape, eyes darting between Hank's cuff body and Marissa standing still in the golden light, arms at her side, calm, statuesque. The illusion had shattered. They saw her now. Not the outsider, not the villain, but the real protector. One of the agents turned to her. "Commander, are you all right?" She nodded once. "I'm good. Thank you." Commander. The word echoed. Not officer. Not agent. Commander. Karen arrived seconds later, speeding in her Lexus, jumping out with her designer purse and too-tight blazer, shouting, "What is going on? I demand answers. You have no right to arrest our security personnel." One of the agents handed her a sealed envelope. "Patricia Loomis, you are now under federal investigation for inciting targeted harassment, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations under Title 18. You'll want to call your lawyer." She stammered. "I didn't know. I was just trying to protect." "You empowered a civilian to brandish a weapon at a federal officer," the agent said. "This isn't an HOA issue anymore." The rest of the night moved in flashes. Statements. Cleanup. Neighbors we'd never spoken to came forward, apologizing, crying. One woman said she always knew something was off, but was afraid to speak up. The HOA board dissolved 2 days later. Patricia was gone within the week. Hank faced 6 charges and was denied bail. And Marissa? She stayed one more week, just long enough to finalize her report and quietly meet with a few people in dark suits I'd never seen before. On her last night home, she sat on the porch next to me, sipping tea. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "Sometimes people need to see the truth with their own eyes," she said. "Sometimes justice needs to walk down a driveway in boots and stare fear in the face." I reached over, squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you." She smiled. "I didn't do it for pride. I did it because power in the wrong hands is always a threat, no matter how small the neighborhood." And just like that, the war in Ridgewood Oaks was over. But none of us would ever forget the day a fake cop pulled a gun on a woman who commands real raids and got a front row seat to what real power actually looks like. The media storm hit within 24 hours. At first, it was just whispers on neighborhood Facebook groups. Someone posted a blurry photo of Hank being cuffed, face down on our driveway, captioned, "HOA gone wild?" But by morning, it had spread to local news, then state, then national. By the third day, headlines were everywhere. Fake HOA cop pulls gun on FBI raid commander, detained at scene by federal agents. Reporters circled our neighborhood like vultures. News vans parked at the entrance of Ridgewood Oaks. Drones hovered for shots of the house. The footage of Marissa standing calmly, arms raised, eyes steady facing a man with a gun, it went viral. Within hours, people online were calling her CommanderCom. The hashtags exploded. Hashtag HOA gone too far and hashtag CommanderCom trended for days. But inside our home, things were quieter. No victory parade, no smug celebration. Just slow breathing, long silences, and a growing weight of what could have happened. We didn't need attention. We needed accountability. Karen, Patricia Loomis, tried to spin the narrative. She went on a local AM radio show claiming she had no idea Hank would carry a firearm, that he misinterpreted HOA authority, and that she was just trying to make the neighborhood safer. But the truth was already out. Federal agents had seized HOA meeting transcripts, internal emails, and surveillance logs. One leaked document revealed Patricia had signed off on Hank's security authority and instructed him to keep an eye on Marissa until she left. The community turned on her instantly. A town hall was called. It wasn't just residents of Ridgewood Oaks, people from neighboring subdivisions, local law enforcement, even veterans showed up. They demanded answers, demanded reform, and demanded justice. One older man, retired Marine, stood up and shouted, "I fought for this country, and this woman was harassed on her own soil? You call that order? I call it terrorism." The HOA board, what was left of it, resigned on the spot. The homeowners voted to dissolve the association permanently, citing negligence, abuse of power, and violation of civil liberties. The Ridgewood Oaks HOA was no more. Hank, meanwhile, wasn't getting off easy. He was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, impersonating a peace officer, unlawful detention, and harassment across state lines. His prior military application records, all falsified, were submitted to the court as evidence of his obsession with power. When the judge denied bail citing public safety risks, he broke down in the courtroom, sobbing. It was pitiful and still not nearly enough. Patricia faced civil lawsuits, federal investigation, and a complete reputation collapse. Her career in real estate crumbled. Her license was suspended. And her family, who once sat proudly in the front row of HOA events, quietly moved away in the middle of the night. But the story didn't end there. A month later, Marissa was invited to speak before a congressional oversight committee about domestic abuse of power and the dangers of unregulated community authority. She walked in wearing her full field dress, silent, composed, and laid out the events of Ridgewood Oaks like a tactical briefing. Not just what happened to her, but what could happen to anyone when power is handed to the insecure, when rules become weapons, and when neighborhood control turns into authoritarian surveillance? Her testimony changed things. Within months, new federal legislation was introduced, dubbed the Community Oversight and Protection Act, calling for national standards on HOA authority, banning armed civilian patrols, and enforcing public accountability. Back home, things settled into a new kind of quiet. The neighbors, the real ones, stopped by more often, apologizing, thanking her. One mother brought flowers. Another brought her son, who saluted Marissa without a word. She bent down, handed him a toy badge from her old academy bag, and said, "Real heroes don't need badges to prove they're good." As for us, we moved 6 months later, not because we were afraid, but because Marissa's battle had brought too much noise, too much visibility. She had done her part. It was time to hand the street back to the people who had learned their lesson. And they had. Ridgewood had been humbled, and maybe even healed. Our new home sits on a quiet lakefront. No HOA, no Karen, just space, trees, and peace. Sometimes I catch Marissa standing on the dock, hands in her pockets, staring across the water like she's watching another battlefield, one not made of bullets or bombs, but of politics and pride. And every so often, I ask if she regrets not walking away sooner. She always says the same thing: no, because they had to learn. And I had to remind them, some of us don't back down. Life has a strange way of finding its rhythm again, even after chaos. In the weeks following the incident, the house felt heavier, not because anything terrible remained, but because the air was thick with reflection. Every step on the porch, every glance toward the driveway where Hank once stood pointing a gun at my daughter, felt like walking through the memory of what could have gone wrong. Yet somehow we weren't broken, not even bruised, just awake. Marissa stayed a little longer than she planned. The FBI gave her the option to take extended leave, and for once, she accepted. I think part of her needed time, not to recover, but to observe. That's who she is. She watches before she acts, absorbs before she speaks. And in that silence, I watched her recalibrate. The weaponized piece of Ridgewood oaks had transformed into a battleground of ideas, of power, and ultimately of accountability. And my daughter had faced it without flinching. But even warriors carry invisible scars. There were nights she walked the backyard with a flashlight, checking shadows that didn't need checking. She installed new cameras, not because she feared a return of Hank or Karen, but because vigilance had always been her shield. Emily would sometimes sit with her in the living room without saying a word, just reading or knitting, letting presence do what words couldn't. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It happens in the quiet hours when no one is filming and no one's watching. Strangely, the community shifted, too. After the HOA dissolved, the neighborhood started meeting informally in the park every Sunday. No agendas, no rules, just conversation. Parents brought their kids. Elderly couples shared lemonade and lawn chairs. People started listening again. Not just nodding, actually listening. And more importantly, they started speaking up. One by one, they told stories about other injustices they'd buried, other times Karen had silenced or embarrassed them, how they stayed quiet because they thought that's what neighborly meant. Marissa's stand had given them something rare: permission to resist. She wasn't just the woman who stood against a fake cop. She became a symbol of earned authority, of power used to protect, not control. And that mattered, especially in a world where too many people forget what true service looks like. But eventually it was time to go. Marissa packed up her things in silence. Her boots, her tactical gear, her books on leadership and psychology. Her voice was steady, but I knew the weight of what happened would stay with her. Not as fear, but as memory. A record, a reminder. Before she left, we stood on the porch one last time, side by side, just like the moment after the standoff. I asked her if she ever thought about what could have gone wrong, if the gun had gone off, if the agents had been a minute too late, if that day had ended in tragedy. She looked at me and said, "Dad, I think about it every day, but I also think about what went right. I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to fight dirty. I just stood my ground, and truth did the rest." And I'll never forget that, because in the end, it wasn't just about Marissa or even about our family. It was about something bigger: the right of every person, regardless of who they are, to live without fear in their own neighborhood. It was about exposing the rot of unchecked authority and planting something new in its place: respect. We left Ridgewood not out of defeat, but out of peace. We had seen the system collapse and rebuild. We'd seen power abused and dismantled. And we'd seen a woman who trains federal tactical teams teach an entire community what real courage looks like without firing a single shot. She left quietly the same way she arrived, no flashing lights, no salute, no uniform. Just a strong woman walking to her car, carrying with her the burden of leadership and the quiet pride of having done what was right. And me? I stood on the porch long after her taillights disappeared down the road. Not in sadness, but in awe, because I knew Ridgewood Oaks would never forget her, and neither would I. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, through the threats, the fear, the silence, and the screaming, it's this: real power doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It stands its ground, speaks only when necessary, and acts only when justice demands it. My daughter didn't fight fire with fire. She fought corruption with clarity. She didn't use her badge as a weapon, she used it as a shield. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that courage isn't loud, it's calm. What happened in Ridgewood Oaks wasn't just an HOA dispute. It wasn't just about petty rules or community guidelines. It was about what happens when people mistake control for leadership and when those who should protect choose instead to intimidate. It was about power handed to the wrong hands and the price we pay when we stay silent. But it was also about something greater: resistance that works and truth that doesn't bend. Because no matter how small the battlefield, whether it's a war zone overseas or a cul-de-sac in suburban America, people like my daughter stand up, not just because they can, but because they must. To every parent listening, protect your children not just from harm, but from the slow erosion of what's right. Teach them that it's okay to say no, to resist, to challenge the fake authority that hides behind fake rules. And to every young woman watching this, especially those who've ever been silenced, doubted, or intimidated, I hope you see a piece of yourself in Marissa. I hope you remember that strength doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it walks quietly down a driveway and stares injustice in the face. And to those still dealing with HOA, abuse, wrongful surveillance, or neighborhood control gone wrong, you're not alone. You don't have to take it. Document everything. Speak up. Push back. And if you don't know where to turn, start right here with us. This channel, HOA Denied Access, exists to expose the stories no one else tells, to amplify voices silenced behind fences and gates. If this story hit home, if it made you think, made you feel something, then do this one thing for me. Hit subscribe. Share this video. Leave a comment. Tell your story. Someone else might need it more than you know. Because what happened on that sunny Friday in Ridgewood wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. And if you think we're done standing up to fake power, you have no idea who you're dealing with.